everybody, it's Jeff from Ayelet Tours, and since 1986 we've been connecting people to Israel and the Jewish world. We are the official travel partner for Hadassah missions to Israel. We run trips all over the world under the banner of the Traveling University, featuring outstanding scholars such as Professor Stephen Burke, Professor Yale Strom, and many others. We run Jewish singles tours around the world. And of course, in part of our mission of connecting people to the Jewish world, we run these virtual programs so that we can, even if we're not able to travel together, we can learn together. I'm very excited for this evening's presentation, which we'll get to momentarily, but I did want to just remind people that we have many travel opportunities coming up for you in the year ahead. If you haven't recently taken a look at our website, I encourage you to do so. We have trips to Iceland, we have trips to Eastern Europe, of course, and we, yes, not coincidentally, have a trip to Lithuania, which Professor Yale Strom and Elizabeth Schwartz will be leading in May 2025. So perhaps you'll be interested in finding out more information about that, or one of the many other amazing trips that we have coming up in the year ahead. One other thing, excuse me. One other thing I just want to make note of before we get going here is we do have a 4-part series with Professor Burke, Professor Stephen Burke, that begins next week. So that's a 4-part series on great moments in Jewish history. I will put into the webinar chat a link for people that are interested in finding out more information about that. And we encourage you to continue to learn together with us virtually, and of course, when possible, to travel with us as an amazing way to connect. So with that introduction, let me introduce our speaker for this evening. Dr. Lara Lempert is the head of the Judaica Research Center at the Documentary Heritage Department in the National Library of Lithuania and the curator of its Judaica collection. Her field of expertise is the cultural history of European and Lithuanian Jewry. She is an author of numerous articles and an editor of several books. Dr. Lempert, it's a pleasure to have you with us this evening. And so for your presentation on the Litvak story, Lithuanian Jewry and its legacy, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff, for inviting me. It is a great honor, especially when I recall so warmly a visit of Professor Yale Strom at the National Library of Lithuania in Vilnius, where I work and where we organized his lecture, and in cooperation with the Vilna Gaon Jewish History Museum, organized also his concert. It was an absolute hit, and people talked about that for a long time afterwards, and so I anticipate with great pleasure his visit in May. And as I understand, it's now time for people who could join the tour, or at least think about Lithuania, to learn more about Lithuanian Jews. Of course, we have a very short time for this full and rich history, so I'll try to concentrate on some important moments. And but the first thing I would like to discuss with you, just to present a question, what is Jewish Lithuania? Is it the same as the Lithuania of nowadays? No, it isn't. And we still call this Jewish space Lita in Hebrew or Lita in Yiddish. It is a territory, it's not the same territory, and of course it's not the same spiritual realm as it used to be for Jews. And the good illustration for why it is not the same is, Jeff, could I ask for the first slide? No, the second, yes. This is the first official, you may say, registering of the Jewish community in Lithuania. But as you see, it is for the Jews of Brest. Brest now in Belarus. It's not Lithuania as such, not the nowadays Lithuania, but this privilege, which is you may call Bill of Rights and Obligations, or which was used for Jews to get a permission to settle somewhere and form a community, was at that time in 1388, it was only for one city, but after that, Jews began to spread in the territory which is nowadays Lithuania, and this same privilege was actual for them. And actually, the Great Duke Vytautas Magnus was Lithuanian Great Duke. And there was a community indeed from that time, communities, but it still wasn't the same or that organic realm that we later will call Litvak territory or Jewish Lita. It came later, and the very important features of what is Litvak and Litvak character we see already in, I'd say, in 18th century, and the best example for that is the Vilna Gaon. If we could see the next slide. Yes, his full name was Eliyahu ben Shlomo Zalman, but he was called Vilna Gaon because, like I think you know, Gaon is the genius or a great scholar. Actually, he was not the only Gaon in Jewish history, and even not the only in Lithuania, but the Vilna Gaon was exactly this person. What was so special about him, and why we cannot omit him when speaking about who is a Litvak? He was a great scholar indeed. He was, of course, a great Talmudist, and what was unusual in his scholarly picture, and I would say that usually in Jewish tradition, people, scholars who know very well one or several branches of the religious literature are usual. They are not unusual, I would say. This person knew, you may say, all the scope of Jewish classical literature, from halacha to Kabbalah to every one of those aspects of Jewish tradition, which also wouldn't be so unique. What was unique, that he only learned and didn't write. All the books we have from him were printed only when he died, and they were collected from the manuscripts and manuscript notes that he left on margins of his used editions and manuscripts, or on some, scraps of paper. Why didn't he publish? Because of two reasons, and those two reasons became very, very important when we speak about the character of Lithuanian Jewry. First, he just lacked time, because he said that all the time you can spare should be dedicated to Torah studies. And he took this quite literally. That means all the time. He was very, very inactive, I would say, very passive in the social life of the community. He was, of course, offered, because of his learning, he was offered many, many positions in the Jewish community, and every time he reclined with the same motivation that a person don't have time for that if he is to dedicate his life to Torah. He was also very passive in economic life. His wife took care of for the well-being of the family. The community, although he declined all the positions, so cherished him, and it was so a prestigious thing for the community to have him, that the community supported him financially, but he only agreed to take a small amount of money presented to him, because he only wanted to have bare necessity, and he wasn't interested in any material gain. This is one thing that was characteristic later for great Lithuanian scholars and even other not so great people. And another thing, and it is again connected why he didn't publish. He wasn't interested in, fame. Just wasn't interested in that. And he also wasn't interested in the whole process of, writing, editing, publishing, negotiating with publishers. Not at all. Of course, he was an exceptional case, Vilna Gaon. He also was a great recluse, as you could understand already. He communicated as little as possible with the community and even with his own family. It gave him a possibility to be such a great scholar. Of course, he was also very talented. How could you be, from one hand, you couldn't even maybe take him as a role model. People need to work, people need to be engaged socially. You couldn't be like Vilna Gaon on one hand. On the other hand, there is a saying known from the old, the saying in Yiddish, if you wish, you would be also, you could also become a Gaon, having in mind Vilna Gaon. And what, from as I said, you actually practically it is very difficult to take such a personality as a role model. On the other hand, the aspiration was always there, and the families, even very poor families, were known for decline everything to parents themselves, just to give their children in a traditional community. Boys, of course, we will speak about girls and women a bit later, a possibility to learn. The aspiration to be a learned person is a feature that characterizes Lithuanian Jews for a long time, beginning more or less from Vilna Gaon. The next slide, please. Could we have a next? Yeah. And one of the representations of that is a very famous edition. It is a Vilna edition of Talmud, which is called Vilna Shas, and it has so many commentaries, including the commentaries of the Vilna Gaon, that still till our days it is better to make a facsimile edition of it than to prepare a new edition of the Talmud. And you see now the edition of the second part of the 19th century, 1881. Still, it is an exemplary edition. It is also very beautiful, at least the title page. It's very accurate and correct. And it, of course, the Talmud wasn't created in Lithuania. Nobody would say that, but the commentaries of Lithuanian origin of Lithuanian Talmudic scholars are also there, along with the great commentaries of the great scholars of the past, like Rashi, Rambam, and so on. So Lithuanian scholars still at this point in Lithuanian Jewish history found their way to the essential edition of Jewish scholarship, the Talmud. And please, the next slide. And this tradition was continued later by a phenomenon which is called Lithuanian yeshivas. And Lithuanian yeshiva is a rabbinic academy. Of course, there are yeshivas all over the world, at least all over the world where Jews are. And it is a traditional way of study But what do we have in mind when we speak about Lithuanian yeshivas? And this is a question similar to what we have in mind when we speak of Jewish Lithuania. It is not a geographical term, Lithuanian yeshivas. It is a term that speaks about a way of learning. And actually, those yeshivas, here we see a world-famous Tels yeshiva. Tels is a town indeed in our days, Lithuania as well. But it is a late yeshiva. I put this slide here because this yeshiva was really so famous that it had students from all over the world, not only from Lithuania, but also from US, the whole Russian Empire, Germany, France, and so on. But even in the beginning of the 19th century, this type of learning was presented in yeshivas that were not at the territory of nowadays Lithuania, like also Belarus and a bit of Latvia. What was special, what is that Lithuanian way of learning? They always said that this is the way of Vilna Gaon. That means that you dedicate all your possible time to study, and there is an expression also not of Lithuanian origin, but very, very popular among Lithuanian Jews: Torah for its own sake, not for the sake of any gain, not for the sake of prestige or fame, but for its own sake. And this study of Torah is a reward in itself as well. Please, the next slide. That's why we see that even it was actually a lifelong study. Of course, young people could only spend time in yeshiva till they form a family. They tried to stay as long as possible. In Lithuania, there were no early marriages, just because it was the usual age for a young man to form a family was 23, maybe 24. Just because of that, because they wanted to study as long as possible and to postpone the moment when they should take responsibility for the family. But after that, the period of indeed laboring for life began, and only in the old age, as people here, when they are in the almshouse even, they don't have families already, they don't have the community cares for them, but they, as you see, they sit and learn, and not only they have books. This almshouse had a special Beit Midrash, a learning learning space for them. And there was one for men and one even for women. And you see also an interesting phenomenon that originated in Lithuanian yeshivas. Where is the teacher? There is actually no teacher. They are able, after all that lifelong learning, to study actually on their own. They communicate with the texts and also they discuss, but they are peers. There is no higher authority, a lone person who would be more knowledgeable than others, although there could be a leader of the discussion, just a moderator, we would say in our own language. But still, it is a result of their studies in their youth, that they are capable of perceiving a very complicated religious text on their own. But they prefer to do it together, like it was the way of the yeshivas. Please, next slide. And even when a modernity period in the end of the 19th century began in Lithuania, Lithuanian modernists, maskils, we would call them, after the name Askala, Jewish Enlightenment movement. were different from their predecessors, let's say in Germany, where the change in attitude to Jewish tradition was rather radical. In Lithuania, it wasn't so. As we see now, the leader of Vilna Jewish Enlighteners was a person whose appearance wouldn't tell us that he is a modernist. What is modern about him? It's a very, very typical traditional Jew. And that's because, but at the same time, he was a journalist. He introduced a Jewish periodical press in Lithuania. He was a first, he was an editor, he was indeed very modern person, but he was all for studying different languages, a part of Hebrew and Yiddish. Actually, nobody studied Yiddish, they just knew Yiddish at the time. But at the same time, he never said that a modern Jew should be distanced from his religious tradition, never. And he was able to show, he and his comrade were able to show that in Lithuania, in Vilnius, this is a possible way. You don't need to be secular to be modern. And this is very, very unique. Could we have, please, next slide? Another portion of that, I'll just check how long do we have. Another portion of that kind was indeed a unique personality. His name was Matityahu Strashun, and he, as you see again, he looks like a very, even more so than Samuel Finn. He has a long beard and he has a very traditional also clothing. We don't see his costume here, but he looks more traditional than even a previous person, but he was a great scholar of the religious literature. He was a Talmudist as well, but also of the modern secular literature. He was a member of many scholarly circles in Europe. He corresponded with Jews and non-Jews on different questions of traditional and academic learning. But what is important for us here, and why there were maybe, he was very, very long person, but there were more like him. But what is very important for us here is that he introduced a really modern and at the same time a really traditional thing in Vilnius. And I mean the first public library in Lithuania. Can we have the next slide, please? This is, as you see in the description, this is the Great Synagogue of Lithuania and the Strashun Library. The library was called after him. What he did, during his life, he accumulated a huge collection of books of religious nature, of Maskilic nature, and other books and periodicals in different languages, mostly in Hebrew, but also in European languages. And in his testament, he bequeathed all that collection to the community with one condition: that this collection will be available for all in a form of a public library. At that time, there was no Jewish public library in Vilnius and in Lithuania. This was the first, and it is a very symbolic and not an occasional thing that it was built near the Great Synagogue of Lithuania. You see the big building, the tall building is the Great Synagogue of Vilnius, and the smaller, shorter building, two stories building, is the Strashun Library. But the library itself is only on the second floor, and on the first floor there are shops, and the condition to establish a shop here at that building was that the shopkeepers would give a part of their gain to upkeep of the library. So this is this is a model how things went in Lithuania. First of all, Strom himself combined great learning with philanthropy. In Vilnius and in Lithuania, people who were rich and didn't give enough for the community were just despised. And not to be despised, they tried to do their best to gain that reputation. But real philanthropists were not so many, and Strom was one of them. But also he was a person of a modern strategic thinking, just to give, and he had precious books. He had very rare books and very, very expensive books, but to give all that to the community was not only a gesture of his goodwill, it was also a vision how more people would benefit for the treasure of learning that was in those books. And this library was immensely popular. It functioned it was opened officially in 1901, after Strashun's death, of course, and functioned till the Holocaust, and was all the time full. There were 100 places to sit, and there were always people who would wait outside or in good weather, and in bad weather they would just stand behind those who were seated and wait for their turn. And the success of the library just proved that this set of values that was of Lithuanian way of life, of Litvak way of life, was formed even in the time of the Vilna Gaon in the 18th century, just continued. And here I need to make a small detour. Our meeting today is called Litvak Story. And do we need to understand this in a way that every Jew who lived in Lithuania was a Litvak? Not at that time. During the time of the Vilna Gaon in Ukraine, the Hasidic movement, of whom, of course, many of you heard, began to develop. And it was against the type of learning and pieties, especially piety, that people were used to in Lithuania. And the circle of Vilna Gaon prevented how do you say it, just coming forgot the word, they prevented his representatives of the Hasidic movement to come to Lithuania. Later it happened, but not at that time. And they began to call themselves the opposers of Hasids, which in Hebrew is mitnagdim, in Yiddish misnagdim. And since all the opposers, opponents were in Lithuania, those people were called then Litvaks. This is the beginning of the term, and it wasn't again purely geographical. It was more an ideological term. People who are not like Hasids, right? And for example, if people from Lithuania, Jews from Lithuania, would travel for some reason to Poland, where Hasidic movement was very, very well developed, they were immediately recognized as Litvaks and called so, even in a derogatory way. But for Lithuanian Jews, a term Litvak became praise, self-praise, and a matter of pride. So this Lithuanian identity, Litvak identity, was fully developed in the time that we are discussing now, I mean, the 19th century. And because of that, even people who were more modern and even secular at that time, a secular option was already there. Even those people, they called themselves Litvaks because they still thought in the same time. Their priority were always also among spiritual and not material things, although, of course, you don't need to idolize them and idealize them, because they needed to work, they needed to eat. Many of them were just involved in that material life, but the aspiration, and this is very important, remained to be a learned person and also to be a moral person, because for many people like Marytė Austrashun were again a role model. And this kind of thinking, this kind of ideals formed Litvak identity further. Can we please have another slide? And here I would like to talk a bit about women. I mentioned that in Lithuania, like in different places in Europe, the obligatory religious education was for boys. Yeshivas also were for young men and not for women. And in many places in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe, women just retained their traditional role. They were not seen in a public space. They were at home in a direct and metaphorical way. They even didn't go that much to synagogue. But in the end of the 19th and especially the beginning and the first part of the 20th century, the situation changes, and Lithuanian women began to be seen and to be especially prominent in the field of education. And the field of education, of course, was traditionally the men's field. And here we see, for example, this is an edition of Jewish religious movement that was born in Poland, but was very, very fruitful in Lithuania, which is called Beit Yaakov. Beit Yaakov, translating from not only from Hebrew, but in biblical verse, means the family, the families. So the families, not men, but their families now became active, and they formed a very, very strong alternative to a secular education, and not because, as it used to be, that the men decided that women should be put aside of the influence of the world by staying at home. No, these women decided that they do indeed need to oppose to the maybe not good things in modernity, but not by staying at home, but by presenting an alternative in education. Please, another slide. And this continued further. This is Esther Rubinstein, a founder of a modern school for Jewish religious girls in Vilnius. What is interesting about her? She was a Rebbetzin. She was a wife of a chief rabbi of Vilnius, Yitzhak Rubinstein, who also was not just a rabbi. He was a politician, a very socially active person, but she, not just like it used to be Rebbetzin, many Rebbetzin indeed were aided in the project of their husbands. No, it was her own project, and the school was called Tarkemoni. It was a part of a religious movement, actually founded by men, but she had a place in this movement, and she was so respected. Then when she died, a special edition was put together in her honor, and people of different branches of education, secular, religious, men, women, wrote articles for this edition. And as we see now, she even looks like an intelligent modern person. We don't even see, we're not sure, this is the only portrait we have. but don't even sure if it is her own hair, or it is maybe even if we decide from her other appearance, maybe she just looked naturally and was allowed to, what is very important. And women continue to take more and more prominent part in all fields of all branches, I would say, of Jewish education. Please, next slide. Yes, this is Sofia Gurevich, head of a secular school. It was Jewish high school, Real Gymnasia. It was very prestigious, and at some point it split it into two divisions, humanities and really Real Gymnasia, that is the maths and other such such object of study, because it was too much for one school, and they wanted to give she wanted to give really good education, quality education, and specified education. She was also a person who everyone in Vilnius knew, not only among educators, students, and teachers. She was really very known. And at that point of time, when I mean the interwar period, the specter of possibilities for a Jewish child to be educated was indeed almost limitless. There were schools in Yiddish, Hebrew, Polish, and Russian, but Jewish schools. There were schools for boys, schools for girls, and co-educatory schools for both. There were religious and secular schools, of course, and there were every possibilities that were available for people, not only Jews, in Europe, like Montessori kindergartens, Frebel's system, and everything what was, you could say, in fashion in education in Europe was here in Vilnius, in Lithuania. And please, next slide. But also there was one school that was unique for Vilnius at the time, a school for children with special needs. For that period in time, it is really unique in Jewish circles. And Vita Levin, who was a person educated in Europe, was a head and a founder of that school. Now, the next slide, please. What was lacking in all that brilliant, spectrum of possibilities? The high, there were from kindergarten to high school, there was no university. There was no Jewish university and not such an opportunity. Yes, Jewish children in Vilnius, which was Polish at the time, and in Kaunas, which was in independent Lithuania, could go to just a general university, although in Vilnius, anti-Semitism in Poland, in general, anti-Semitism prevented many of them to get there, and also made their life there as students rather uncomfortable. In independent Lithuania, the situation was better, and I need to tell you that geopolitically, there were two different countries at the time, Lithuania and Poland, but the Jewish community, geopolitically, it was split, but in their way and in their character, it was the same community of Lita or Lite. And in Vilnius, there was an institution founded in 1925, which was called YIVO, or Jewish Scientific Institute, that partly fulfilled that mission to give Jews a possibility of yet higher level of education. There were no students. It was a research institution, and I'm very happy to say that it continues, one of very few that survived Holocaust and continues their its activities now in New York. as a very major center for Jewish studies, but at the time, everything was concentrated in Vilnius, and let's say New York branch was only an auxiliary branch for Vilnius Center. The person we see here on the only person with the standing person with glasses in the center is the director of the institute, Max Weinreich. Thank you. Yes, this is him, and he luckily left for New York with the outbreak of the Second World War. He didn't want to, but he was he needed to, and he was responsible for the flourishing of the New York branch and gradually developing it into the main center, because of course after the war, during the war, there were nothing left in Vilnius, and many his colleagues perished. But at that time, it was a miracle of the Jewish world, and it's not an exaggeration. I'm now working, for example, with correspondence of the Yale Institute that we have in the archives of the National Library of Lithuania. There are, up to now, I found it 14 languages in which they corresponded with the Jews of the whole world, from Estonian to Romanian to, of course, Spanish, German, English, and so on. And I'm not speaking here about Yiddish, which was the main object of research in this institute. And they also developed postdoctoral studies, although there were doctoral studies, although there were no BA and MA that they could present to young students, but it was still a possibility to come and learn and make research with the veteran scholars in that institution. And in, please, next slide. In the Vytautas Magnus University of Kaunas, this was, of course, a general university, but there was a chair for Semitic studies who was, and that chair was led by Chaim Nachman Shapiro. And what is interesting about him, he was a son of a chief rabbi of independent Lithuania. This didn't prevent him, and his family, his father, didn't prevent him to get his education in Germany. He returned to Lithuania, and when he went to university and asked, he made his doctorate in Marburg, and he came to the university and asked to be joined into the staff of the university, and he was told that since he didn't have his doctoral thesis in Lithuanian, by some protocol, he couldn't pretend for a position. So what he did, he learned Lithuanian, he wrote another thesis, PhD thesis, and then he was accepted. I also, because we have a little time left and I need to tell about some painful things in Lithuanian history, I'd like you to pay attention to the date when this portrait was made. It was made in Kaunas ghetto by a painter, Esther Lurie, and of course, this is his last portrait of Chaim Nachman Shapiro. Now I see that I made too big a presentation, and I would now need to skip a bit and to tell at least something about the Holocaust in Lithuania. Many of you know how devastating it was for the Jews in Lithuania. Not, of course, for all European Jews, but in Lithuania, the percent of people who perished in the Holocaust, of Jews who perished in the Holocaust, is estimated between 94 and 96 percent of the total population, which is just so tragic that we would never think that the Jewish community could revive itself and exist after the Holocaust. And I just the second one second picture I would show you, would like to show you. No, let's skip. Yes, again, next, next. Here it is. No, the previous one. Yes. You see, this is only one picture that I may have time to show you before I need to conclude and for us to have time for questions. This is yeshiva in Vilnius ghetto. And what is this kind of spirit, indomitable spirit that made people even in the ghetto, and it was not only in Vilnius ghetto, the schools were active in, of course, unlegal schools, underground schools were active in Vilnius ghetto and in Kaunas ghetto as well. And people, educators, teachers of previous time before the Holocaust dedicated all their energy to educate the youngs even in the ghetto, even if it would be their last days. Still, education and the developing of the only hope for the future could be gained through engaging young people and children in a productive activity, in learning, again, in learning. And so, because of that, even in the ghetto, there was cultural life, and many marvel, how could it be possible, please, next slide, to have concerts and theater actually in the ghetto, please, the next. Write poetry in the ghetto. Here we see a manuscript of a great Yiddish writer, Avram Sutzkever, that he wrote in the ghetto and produced this manuscript book in 1943 in Vilnius ghetto. Please, the next. There was a library in Vilnius ghetto, and the books were very much read. Every book that we have now in the National Library with a stamp of Vilna Ghetto Library are very well read. People read just to escape, of course, but also because they were used to read before the war. So the war didn't stop them. Even the perspective of near death didn't stop them, because it was that Litvak spirit. Please, the next. And we are now in our days. The choral synagogue in Vilnius and the next one in Kaunas were the only synagogues, almost only synagogues in the whole Soviet Union that were not closed and not remade into something different. They used to work they retained their function as synagogues. And you could ask, whom for? There were almost no people left, but still those who left, they tried as best they could to continue their Litvak ways. And that meant that they needed a religious community. Although the communities were small, they were weak, they still were strong in spirit, and even the authorities recognized that, and they left those buildings. Of course, only one in Vilnius among among about 100 that used to be there before the war, and even the building, some of the buildings remained, but the only synagogue could be left as a as a place of prayer there. And also in Kaunas, a similar situation was there. The community was small and that there was only one place of prayer left, but still they were there. And so it continues. Those two synagogues are still the only two acting synagogues in Lithuania. And although Jewish community of Lithuania now is very much secular, people still cherish the possibility to go to synagogues on holidays and to gather there, which is nothing, I would say, if we would speak about US or Israel, nothing special here. How would you not go for Yom Kippur to the synagogue? It's a natural thing. But after all the devastation that Nazis brought, and after all the repressions of the Soviet time that was so anti-religious and so anti-national culture and so anti-Jewish and so anti-Semitic, people still do that now. And this is not a small achievement. This was my, actually, in the time allowed, was my last maybe sentence, but I would be very happy to answer your questions if you have any. Thank you so much.
All right, I think it's pretty clear, Dr. Lempert, that we need to do another session because there's a lot to cover.
It's
that
a half of
we couldn't-
presentation left, yes.
or even better, people should come to Lithuania to have the
This I
opportunity
suggest
to
very
meet you.
strongly, because you will then you will see the things not on the screen but alive.
Absolutely. So just a reminder for folks, if you'd like to participate, you can post your questions into the Q&A function within the Zoom window. We'll get to as many of them as possible. Before we do that, I just want to, first of all, say thank you for that excellent presentation. There's just a tremendous amount to cover, and I appreciate how much you were able to cover within this short time. Okay. We already have several questions that have come in. This is an interesting one that came in from Shirley Michaelov, who would like to know if you can tell us about Zionism in Lithuania pre and post World War II.
Oh, this is an excellent question, because there is even a book which is called Vilna and its Zionists, because the Zionist movement was very strong in Lithuania, even proto-Zionist movement in those Lithuanian yeshivas from the end of the 19th century, even. Of course, you wouldn't call that the modern Zionist movement, but also the modern Zionist movement was very strong in Lithuania. What was unique about Lithuanian Zionists? Of course, there were people who would participate in kibbutzei achshara, in the preparatory movement to indeed make aliyah, and they would do that, but also in in a system of the Hebrew education in Lithuania, in Vilnius and in the independent Lithuania, like the Tarbut schools, they were not preparing students actually to make aliyah, but they were preparing them to learn Hebrew, to be Zionist in their ideology, as to for them to make their own informed choice when they became older. And indeed, the Zionist Vilnius and Zionist Lithuania, I come across those documents of them almost every day. It was really very strong. What is very interesting about the post-war, when the Soviet Union was just hostile against Israel from some point in time, and for one to be a Zionist, it was a risk not only for career, but you could end in prison for that. Still in Lithuania, there was Zionist youth movement, and I actually recall it before Lithuania became independent, when it was really risky. And after Lithuania became independent, I mentioned that people left. Yes, they left en masse, but also many people just stayed in Lithuania like myself, learned Hebrew, taught Hebrew. There was a youth movement and many, many things that were already possible and legal, and then it flourished.
We have so many great questions coming in. So Barbara Zimmerman would like to know if you could talk a little bit about the size of the Jewish community in Lithuania now, and at the same time, if you could just clarify, Marlene Cohn just she mentioned the statistic you gave about 94 to 96% of the Jewish community being wiped out. Before that happened, before the Holocaust, what percent of the population of Vilnius was Jewish?
Okay, let me begin from the past and come to the present. On the eve of the Holocaust, the Jewish population of Vilnius made about 40% of the population of the city. As to the whole Lithuania, it depended, of course, but in the smaller towns, usually it was more than a half of the population. And in some of them, the smallest, the much more than a half. When again after the war and in the 90s, when the new Lithuanian independence came and people began to leave, it was about what I need to say is the Jewish community of Lithuania on the eve of Lithuanian independence was not only the survivors. It would be much smaller. But in the Soviet time, many people by the Soviet policy were brought to Baltic states to rebuild them as Soviet republics. And among those people were many Jews. And some of them were not very, active as Jews, to put it mildly. But at the end of the Soviet Union and on the eve of independence, in the very first years of Lithuanian independence, this community was already more coherent and it was able to meet challenges of time. In the very first year of Lithuanian independence, the Jewish kindergarten, the Jewish school was established, the Jewish museum was established, and it was made by people who maybe were not originally from Lithuania. Like myself, I am not originally from Lithuania, but I consider myself a part of the community. So this community was rather big on the eve of Great Aliyah, but the Aliyah also was indeed very active. So we came to a figure of 3,000, more or less, Jews of Lithuania, and this figure doesn't change now for a decade because people, yes, still go to Israel, but not in those quantities.
Okay, I got to tell you, I have so many comments, questions in here from people who have personal connections to Lithuania through their past relatives. So I'm just going to give you a sampling of them, and then we'll kind of transfer that into a question, okay? So Tamar Jaffe writes in, my grandfather was a graduate of Volozhin Yeshiva.
Volozhin Yeshiva.
Yeah,
So
of
how
Vilna.
great.
Arnold Sivens writes, thank you, Dr. Lempert. My great-great-grandfather was Meyer Isserman. Where can I find more information about him? He was the pickler rabbi of Slobodka. So something
It's
something incredible.
overwhelming.
And I'll tell you, there's several more. This is really incredible. There's an anonymous one. My ancestor's original name was Ram. I have many letters from Lithuania, late 1800s to 1930. No one seems to be able to translate. Where can I go to translate them? And that's the thing. We have many people here. One more. I'll give you one more. David Lasowitz writes, thank you, Dr. Lempert, for a very informative and enjoyable presentation. I've been curious about why my great-great-grandfather, a butcher from Ligum, Lithuania, indicated that our family's last point of departure from Europe was Dorpat, Tartu, Estonia.
Yeah.
Why would the family have migrated to Estonia before leaving for America? So I'm going to give you two questions. Number one, that question about going through Estonia in terms of leaving. And number two, we have so many people who would like to find out more about their genealogical roots in Lithuania. Do you have a suggestion or a resource for people looking to do further research?
Of course. About this going to US through Dorpat through Tartu in Estonia. This is an interesting case and not a usual track for Jews to go there. So I cannot actually answer, but I can try to inquire and research. And at that point, I need to say, if Jeff agrees, he could share my information, my contacts. Please write to me. Just write to me to the Judaica Research Center. We have many requests of that kind, and we are very, very happy to answer if we have answers. But if you are really interested specifically in the history of your family, it's better to directly address a Lithuanian state archives. They have this service for people, and there are many, many requests. Lithuanian state archives, they could be found online, and you could write to them, and they would ask you to give the information you have, minimal, as many facts as you do have, for them to start, and they would make research for you.
So a couple more, just because this is very fun with what everybody's writing in. Marty Evans, who has attended many of these programs with us, says, my great, 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 great four greats grandfather was the Vilna Gaon. Thank you for the presentation.
No,
Yeah, true.
it is just a revelation.
It's amazing. And let's see. Linda Markowitz writes, my great-great-grandfather was Rabbi Benjamin Gittleson, who was the rabbi in Trushkun and Avanta before being asked to settle in Cleveland, Ohio in 1890 and became the chief rabbi of Cleveland. So just so you know, you have a amazing audience listening to you right here.
Yeah, because I hear all those names, Ligum, Troshkuno in the province Lithuania. Those are exactly these small shtetls, small cities where Jewish presence was very much felt and where great scholars lived not only in Vilnius or Kaunas, not at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So really incredible audience here. And okay, we'll get back to actual questions. We got lots of genealogy here, but okay, Lindsay Rosenthal would like to know, when were the waves of immigration from Vilna and the other parts of Lithuania during Russian rule to the United States and Western Europe, and what prompted those Jews to leave?
Yeah, of course. It is actually an easy answer because those points in time are very well known. The first great wave of immigration of Jews from Lithuania and Vilnius was, of course, after the pogroms in the Russian Empire in 1903, 1905. And this was the time when it was also an economic depression. So all those things prompted Jews to leave. And not, by the way, not Jews left because of two of those reasons, but Lithuanian people then left who were not Jewish because it was a great low in economics. Another one came after the First World War, which was a really tragic time for to live in Lithuania, because the war was Lithuania was the first country to be occupied by the German army, and of course they were not Nazis, but still the war devastated the country very much, and the Jewish community suffered tremendously from it, and economically as well. But not only economically. When the war came, many communities, whole communities, were taken by Russian authorities by force and moved, displaced, actually moved into Russia, because they were expected to collaborate with Germans because of Yiddish. It was a very foolish idea, but it was in practical terms really devastating for the community, because the whole families, the whole towns were displaced into the Russia, and they needed to make a living there. So not everybody even returned after the war, and those who returned also didn't find much inspiration, economically and otherwise there, and many left. So there were two main waves of immigration.
Okay. These are incredible comments people are putting here. But okay. David Goldstein writes in, what was special? This is a very interesting question. What was special about Lithuania that allowed scholars and yeshivot to flourish in the 18th and 19th centuries? Was Lithuania's freedom of religion unique among countries at the time?
You know, Lithuanian scholars who research Lithuanian Jewish relations are very fond of this suggestion that yes, Lithuania was so open and so tolerant that it was the reason. I wouldn't say that it should be taken as an absolute, because maybe it was a good condition for Jews to settle in Lithuania, indeed, maybe better than in other places. Indeed, in the early or pre-modern period, there were not much persecution of Jews in Lithuania. But speaking about scholarly development, about the huge amount of rabbis and scholars and Talmudists in Lithuania, I don't think that religious tolerance or political tolerance has much is much of a reason for that. What I was trying to say and show, maybe if we had more time, maybe I could be more convincing in that the ideal of the community, the inspiration of the community was always Torah for its own sake. And you would do much and you would dedicate much time and you would also sacrifice much for that. Let me give you just one example, because it's 2 o'clock in the night in Lithuania.
You are amazing. I didn't say it at the beginning. I should have said that you are
No,
live
that's
from
okay.
Vilna
That's
right
okay. I
now.
am
Yeah.
fine, but it's very unusual situation still. So the people who were not so spiritual and could not have a possibility to be so, because they needed to work and work hard every day, they would come to a synagogue in the evening, and after the evening prayer, they would sit and learn in a group. They would take a book, and there would be an instructor, like a moderator, like I mentioned, who would read with them a book according to their abilities. For really capable people, it would be the Talmud. For less so, it would be a Mishnah. For even less so, it would be one of the religious codices, like Shulchan Aruch, or even Chaye Adam or something. But still, there will be a learning group. I cannot imagine how you come after 12 hours work day of hard labor work, and you study. How do we know that? Because we have stamps of those study groups on the books in the National Library and the University Library, many places more than that. We do know if it's a very easy book, relatively easy book, so the laborers would come and study it. So but they would come, they would.
Okay, you're right. We're past the top of the hour, and it's very, very late at night for you, so we'll start to wrap up here. Just one more question. I know some people when they call about this Lithuania trip in particular, they're interested about particularly with everything going on in the world, and it's a kind of a heated environment, and what we see even here happening here in the States. They want to know about anti-Semitism today in Lithuania. What's the situation like for anybody that's traveling on our trip next May or on their own to Lithuania? What's the situation like in terms of anti-Semitism today?
First of all, I am very happy to say that Lithuania is safe. For now, I don't know what will be tomorrow or day after tomorrow, but for now, it is really safe. It is very loved by tourists. You are very welcome, and usually people, not that it is safe environment, but also if nobody, for example, identify you as a Jew, you also wouldn't see any pro-Palestinian demonstration on the street. You would see no violence of that kind, or no, I don't know. You would continue with the examples. That doesn't mean that there is no anti-Semitism in Lithuania, but the state is officially very much against. This is one thing. the state not always capable to do anything with this politician or another populist who would be even openly on the verge of anti-Semitic statements, but he would be always on the margins. And another thing, that Lithuanian state and government choose to be very pro-Israel. And we see it on every step. For example, the latest example even didn't happen yet. On the October 7, there will be a solemn gathering in the Lithuanian parliament dedicated to this macabre, anniversary. I wouldn't even think that it is possible, but now I know it is scheduled. So maybe I hope that your own experience, first of all, I hope you will have that experience. Please come. And second of all, I hope it will be pleasant.
Dr. Lempert, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We'll see if we can schedule another program because I know there was a lot that we didn't get to. But I'm so appreciative of the time that you spent with us. If people would like to get in touch with you, of course, they can contact me and I can put you in touch.
Yes, please do.
There's, as you said, there are resources in Lithuania to help people with genealogy. And clearly, there are a lot of people that would like to research that further. Any closing thoughts or words before we wrap this up?
I do think that I estimated wrongly, and I didn't tell, because of that, I didn't tell about many portions and many phenomena in Lithuanian Jewish life, which worth talking about. But this just shows you, but it is an endless story. The Litvak story is an endless story, and Litvak legacy is continued throughout the world, because after the Holocaust, a term Litvak became again a source of pride, but in another meaning. I think that people, and there are many people who call themselves Litvaks, and I am sure that in this audience there are many such people. They call them not only because of Jewish history, but also because of Jewish memory, and this is the major legacy.
As you said, it's a story that there's a lot to it, and it's a story that you've helped to tell very well. So thank you for taking the time. I did post in here the link for people that are interested in traveling with Professor Strom and Elizabeth Schwartz next May. You can also find all of the information about that tour and lots of others on our website, ayelet.com. I think that's just about it for tonight. Dr. Lempert, thank you so much for staying up so late to be with us live.
Thank you very much for invitation, and thank the audience for the questions. They were great.
Absolutely. Okay, all the best.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.